What if the next Silicon Valley didn't rise in California or China, but in a country shattered by war? Syria? Today, we're diving into one of the most unexpected stories in tech, how young Syrian entrepreneurs, scarred by years of civil war and sanctions, are daring to dream of building their own Silicon Valley. From coding apps under bombed-out ceilings to hosting international tech conferences in Damascus, this is a tale of resilience, innovation, and a fight to rebuild a nation through technology. It's 2011. Syria is swept into the Arab Spring. As neighboring countries topple dictators, Syrians flood the streets, hoping for the same. But instead of change, they're met with brutal crackdowns. Internet censorship was everywhere, but young Syrians were clever, using VPNs and proxy tools to stay connected. Universities kept producing engineers and programmers, and a fragile tech scene sprouted in Damascus and Aleppo. Apps like WhatsApp and Skype became lifelines, often banned, often resurrected. In those days, launching a startup wasn't just about business, it was about survival. Meet Hamza Hourani and Bashar al-Jabawi, two young founders with a simple dream, an education app called Quizat. The app was downloaded by 15,000 students, offering quizzes and games for high schoolers. But the Assad regime wasn't thrilled. They demanded licenses, server control, access to user data, and of course, a cut of profits. The founders were even threatened with arrest. Then, fate intervened. On the very day they were supposed to face the regime again, rebel forces stormed Damascus. Assad fled to Moscow. 14 years of war had left over 500,000 people dead, but for Hourani, it meant a glimpse of freedom. The first thing that happened when the regime fell, he said, was that mobile phones started working again. It felt like a sign. Despite bombed-out cities and sanctions choking the economy, some apps became household names. YallaGo, Syria's ride-hailing lifeline. At its peak, 15,000 families relied on it for income, and 500,000 customers used it. Order, a food delivery app that also trained young people in entrepreneurship. Both were pressured by the regime to hand over data and profits. At one point, YallaGo's servers were shut down. Syrians actually took to the streets, not for politics this time, but for an app. Within 24 hours, the servers were back online. That's how vital tech had become. But let's pause. How do you build a tech hub when half your population is displaced? Only 1/3 of people have internet access, GDP has shrunk by more than 50% in a decade, and sanctions make investors run for the hills. That's the impossible equation Syrian entrepreneurs faced, yet some still refuse to give up. When Assad's regime collapsed, something remarkable happened. For the first time in decades, Syrians could meet with government officials without fear. At the iconic Roda Cafe, once filled with spies, tech founders sat down with the new Minister of Communications, Abdul Salam Haikal. A tech entrepreneur himself, he scrapped licensing fees, slashed red tape, and promised to modernize infrastructure. He even admitted to using ChatGPT to shorten his induction speech, a symbolic nod to the very tech Syrians wanted to embrace. Hourani, the Quizat founder, was stunned. These are serious people who want change. But the real shift came when the Syrian diaspora returned. Engineers who had worked at Google and Apple flew back for Sync 2025, the biggest tech conference in Syrian history. Organizers expected 60 attendees. Over 3,000 showed up from 15 countries. Entrepreneurs like Abdul Wahab Amira, once jailed as a teenager, came back from the US determined to rebuild. He found his childhood neighborhood in ruins, but his old computer science book still intact, a metaphor for Syria itself. Broken but not destroyed. Then came Bassel Oje, a Silicon Valley CEO, who said Syria's blank slate made it the ultimate disruptor. Here is a market of 22 million people that needs absolutely everything. And then, a bombshell. In May 2025, during a trip to Saudi Arabia, Donald Trump announced the lifting of US sanctions on Syria. The streets erupted in celebration. YallaGo rolled out discount codes named YallaTrump. Quizat launched its own code, Freedom. For the first time in over a decade, Syria could access services like Google Workspace, Zoom, and Slack. Investment interest from the Gulf, Europe, and even the US suddenly became real. But let's not sugarcoat it. Syria's economy is still devastated. 1 in 4 Syrians lives in extreme poverty. Inflation averaged 50% during the war. Security is shaky, sectarian tensions remain, and international investors are cautious. Yet, in coffee shops and co-working spaces across Damascus, young coders are saying, it starts with spirit. Syria's quest to build its own Silicon Valley isn't just about apps or coding boot camps. It's about rewriting a nation's story. It's about proving that innovation can grow out of rubble, and that sometimes the strongest startups are born in the darkest places. Like and subscribe for more stories like this.